Hello, econ students. This is 3.6. It has the longest of names. But before I read that, remember that 3.7 came before 3.6. So before you start taking notes, you might want to go back to that gap you left between 3.4 or 3.5, I should say, and 3.7 and place your notes there. If you don't care about that at all, don't worry about it. Just do your thing. So 3.6 is short run decisions to produce and long run decisions to enter or exit the market. So basically, it's two concepts, and they couldn't find a way to break it down any simpler than that. So let's get to it. So the question I have for you is, should a firm produce or not produce given the following circumstance? So assume a firm produces 10 units and sells each of them for $10 each. Their average total cost is $15 and their average variable cost is $8. All right, can you calculate total revenue, total costs, and variable costs and fixed costs? Okay, so let's do this one together. Here we go. So how do I find total revenue? Well, I know total revenue is going to be my price times my quantity, right? So I jump up here, it says the firm produces 10 units and they sell each of them for $10. So price times quantity is going to be 10 times 10 or $100. 100. Okay, jump here. What about total costs? Well, how do I calculate total costs? Let me change the color so it's not confusing for you. Calculate total costs by doing your average total costs, ATC, times my quantity, the quantity that was produced. It told you how much was produced. It's 10. So my average total cost is 15. 15. Just like if this was on a graph, I'd take my average total cost times my quantity, be a box, right? The area, we're doing the same thing to take average and create a total out of it. So 15 times my quantity is, or I'm sorry, yeah, my quantity is 10. And so this is going to be $150. That's my total cost. Okay, if my average variable cost is $8, can you calculate your total variable cost? Oh, let me change colors here. So let's say my average variable cost is $8 right here. I know average variable cost, AVC, times quantity. That's how you take any average and make it a total. Average variable cost times quantity will equal my total variable cost. So that's going to be 8 times 10. So my total variable cost is going to be $80. Okay, which means that my fixed cost must be what? So I jump over here. Let me change the colors one more time for you. So my total fixed cost. Well, what's my average fixed cost? Well, there are two ways I can find this. First, I can find the difference between average total cost and average variable cost. Remember, AVC plus ATC equals, or I'm sorry, plus AFC equals ATC, right? So that would be 15. My average total cost is 15. My average variable cost is 8, which means my average fixed cost must be 7. And then I take average fixed cost, 7, times quantity, 10, 7 times 10, and that'll give me $70. Or I can simply take total costs minus my total variable costs. 150 minus 80, which will give me $70 as well. Okay, so that is my total fixed costs. So far, so good. What are our profits or losses? Well, if I'm looking at this, my profits or losses are based on my total revenue and my total cost. So I take my total revenue minus my total cost. My total revenue is 100. My total costs are 150, 150. That means that my company is currently experiencing a $50 loss. It's in the negative. They're losing $50. So here's the question that we've been trying to get to this whole time. Should this firm continue to produce or should they shut down? Well, if they shut down and produce a quantity of 0 units, what are their fixed costs? How much do they still have to pay? Well, I know even when quantity is 0, at 0, we still have fixed costs, right? So at $0, they will still have to pay, or a quantity of 0, they'll have to pay $70. So here's the juxtaposition. Does it make sense to produce and pay $80 to produce, or have a loss, sorry, of $50, or to shut down and have a fixed cost of $70? Should I have a $50 loss or shut down and pay $70? Well, of course I should keep on producing. I'll continue to produce because it's better for me to produce and lose $50 than to shut down and still have to pay my fixed costs. That's the shutdown rule, right? If your fixed costs are greater than your economic losses, you're going to keep producing because it's better to have only lost 50 instead of shutting down and having to pay 70. But as soon as your variable costs, I'm sorry, as soon as your fixed costs become less than your losses, fixed costs are less than your losses. As soon as that's the case, then you should shut down, right? Losses are huge, fixed costs are small. Makes sense to shut down because all I have to pay are my fixed costs. We call that the shutdown rule. Let's try this again. Okay, so we have our 20 units. We sell each of them for $8 each. Their average total cost is 15. Average variable cost is 10. Do the same thing. Can you calculate these things? Go ahead and pause the video and try it out, and then I'm going to roll through them quickly. Okay, did you get it? Let's try it together. So total revenue is going to be my quantity times my price, 20 times 8. That's going to be $160. My total cost is going to be average total cost 15 times quantity of 20. 15 times 20 is $300. Cool. All right, jump on to the next one. My variable costs. Well, we know variable costs are my average variable cost of 10 times my quantity of 20. 10 times 20 is $200. And then my fixed costs are going to be the difference between the two. So I'll jump here. My fixed costs are going to be $100. If at a quantity of 20 units, 200 of that is variable costs, and my total costs are 300. The difference between those two has to be my fixed costs. So then we do profit or losses. Remember, profit or losses is total revenue, 160, minus my total cost, 300, which means I have a loss of $140. This is a loss. So the question becomes, should I shut down or continue to produce? But if I shut down, what do I have to pay? If you shut down, you have to pay your fixed costs right here. So I'll have to pay $100 if I shut down. If I keep on producing, though, I will have to pay my loss of $140. So which do I prefer? Do I prefer to shut down and pay $100 or produce and lose $104? Okay. Of course, it's better to shut down. As soon as my losses are greater than my fixed costs, you need to shut down because it's better to lose $100 by producing than lose $140 in fixed costs by producing nothing. I'm sorry. Right. It is better shut down and lose $100. That's what I meant, my fixed costs, than to lose $140 by producing. Oopsies. All right. So let's get some words to that, shall we? The shutdown rule goes as follows. A firm should continue to produce as long as the price is above average variable cost. Why above average variable cost? Because when price is above AVC, that means the fixed cost is smaller than my losses. I'll say that again. When price is above AVC, means my fixed costs are going to be smaller than my losses, so I'll continue to produce. As soon as the price falls below average variable cost, it means my fixed costs are going to be smaller because it's the distance between AVC and ATC, going to be smaller than my losses, which means that I should shut it down. I'm going to lose less money by shutting it down and just paying my fixed costs than I would by continuing to produce and incur that loss. There you go. So when price is below AVC, the firm is losing money and it's cheaper to shut down because my fixed costs are less than my loss. And that's only going to happen when price or Mr. DARP falls below average variable cost. Let's take a look at this on the graph. Let's say we're right here. We got our Mr. DARP there. And we're producing a quantity of 5. So my total cost is going to be 7 times 5. My total cost is going to be $35, right? My total revenue is going to be 4 times 5. My total revenue is going to be $20. My losses then, of course, are going to be 35 minus 20, or I'm sorry, 20 minus 35, or $15 in losses. My fixed costs are only $10. Remember, it's the vertical distance between these two curves, ATC and AVC. So it's 5 to 7, or 2 times 5. 2 times 5 is $10. So if my fixed costs are $10 and I have a loss of $15, should I stay open or should I shut down? Well, by shutting down, I will only have to pay $10. By staying open, I will have to pay a loss of $15. Of course, I should shut down. When price is below average variable cost, Mr. DARP is our price. That's the P of Mr. DARP. When it's below average variable cost, the loss, which is this box here, is going to be larger than the fixed cost. So you cut your losses by shutting down. All right, let's try this little graph out here. So at a price of 0A, economic profits are. Okay, that's a little bonus question for you. So 0A, so price is right here. If this is our Mr. DARP, MR equals D equals average revenue equals price. If that is true, then what are my profits? Well, here, I'm sorry, right here is going to be the quantity that I produce. That's quantity. So total revenue is going to be A times Q. Total cost, though, are going to be at this quantity. I'm going to dash up until I hit average total cost, which is right there. So the total costs are going to be B times Q, which means that our profit is going to be this distance right here between my total cost and my total revenue. It's going to be A, H, B, K, or A, B, K, H. Okay, so next question is, in the short run, the firm will stop producing when price falls below what? Well, I know as soon as price falls below AVC, right? When price is less than AVC, that's when I'm going to shut down, right? So when does that happen? Well, here's the average variable cost here. Price is going to have to fall below D somewhere in order for price to be lower than AVC, in order for that to be true. Or in other words, in order for the losses to be greater than the fixed costs. So the answer is going to be 0D. Just another way to answer that same question. Okay. So remember, just an easy way to remember this is you will shut down when price is below the minimum AVC point, right? We know the minimum AVC point, which is right here, right? Is going to be at the intersection between MC and AVC. So if you have something where, draw this in blue, if I have something like this as my Mr. DARP, I'll just put MR equals P for short, Mr. P. Well, this I'm going to stay open because remember, as long as I'm above the minimum point, my losses are going to be smaller than my fixed costs at MR equals MC. It's only when I fall below that minimum point at that intersection, so when I fall down here, for example, that is when I'm actually going to shut it down. Okay? When price is below average variable cost, losses are going to be greater than fixed costs, so shut it down and just pay your fixed costs. All right, so remember, if price is really low, like this, we're going to shut down. As price goes up, notice something. Price rises, we're at this point here. Price rises again. What's happening to quantity as price goes up? Well, as price goes up, our quantity is rising. And when quantity goes down, price goes down, which should tell you something that should be familiar to you. That's the same as the law of supply. When price rises, quantity supply goes up. When price falls, quantity supply goes down. So when marginal cost is above my average total cost curve, there we go, we just said that. my marginal cost is going to be equal to supply. Now, why do I tell you this? Sorry, my phone's blowing up here. Why do I tell you this? Well, sometimes they sneak a little question in where they say, hey, short run supply for a firm is indicated by what? It's indicated by the marginal cost curve above average variable cost. This upward sloping marginal cost curve there is equal to supply and operates like supply. So there you go. That's the big takeaway. The marginal cost above AVC is a short run supply curve. So we can apply some of our rules. If variable costs increase, like a per unit tax or an excise tax, what's going to happen? Well, we know when taxes go up, supply shifts left. So when taxes go up for this individual firm, average variable cost is going to rise, and so is marginal cost, which indicates a leftward shift in supply. Whoa, right? So when marginal cost increases, supply decreases or shifts to the left, and vice versa. Uh, variable cost goes down. For example, there's a subsidy. Well, average variable cost falls, marginal cost falls, but my supply curve, marginal cost, shifts to the right. So when marginal cost decrease, supply increases. This is something we know intuitively already, right? So you don't have to worry about this too much. Just know that sometimes they will indicate marginal cost as a supply curve instead of just as a marginal cost curve. Just keep that in mind. It operates the same way. For example, you might get a question like this. The short run supply curve for a firm, keyword there is firm, an individual firm in a perfectly competitive industry is. Well, the answer is going to be its marginal cost curve above the minimum point of the average variable cost curve, right? Why does it have to be above the minimum point? Because anywhere below that, we're going to shut down. So we're not actually going to produce any quantity at all. So it's not a supply curve at that point. Okay, now we're moving on to the second part of this particular section, which is should a firm enter or should a firm leave a market? Something to keep in mind in a perfectly competitive market, if one firm's experiencing profits, all firms are experiencing profits. Remember when we were talking about selling potatoes or whatever, carrots, whatever it was we were selling, right? When I'm profitable, it means everybody else is profitable. We share profits equally. And those profits signal something. When competitive firms, perfectly competitive firms, are profitable, firms are going to see that, outside firms, and they're going to enter the market. So they're going to start selling potatoes and competing with us on those potatoes or those green beans or whatever, right? And when there are losses, everyone's experiencing losses at the same time. We share losses evenly, just like we share profits because we have identical goods. So if we're all experiencing losses, well, some firms are going to shutdown rule. When those firms shut down, then they leave the market. When firms leave the market, right, everything goes back to normal. Profits start to rise for everybody else. So keep that in mind. When firms are profitable, other firms are going to enter. And when the perfectly competitive firms are losing money, firms are going to exit the market. So with that in mind, let's try this out. Assume a firm produces 10 units, sells each of them for $200 each. Average total cost is 120. Average variable cost is 100. Let's calculate these again. Okay. So again, I'm going to go super fast just for the sake of time, but you can pause this and try them out on your own if you want. So total revenue, we know, is going to be my price times my quantity. My price is $200. My quantity is 10. So my total revenue is going to be $2,000. So far, so good. What about my total cost? Well, we know that total cost is my average total cost times my quantity. So 120 times 10, my total cost is going to be 1,200. Okay, so do I have a profit or a loss? So I take my total revenue, 2,000 minus my 1,200. 2,000 minus 1,200 is plus $800. I have a profit. Question, are firms, if this is perfectly competitive, we're making identical products and every other firm is making $800, are firms going to enter this market or leave this market in the long run? Well, the answer, of course, is that firms are going to enter the market. Right? They're going to enter the market because they want to a share of those profits. So other firms would have an incentive to enter the market. Remember, it's not just $800 in accounting profit. It's an economic profit, which means this is a great opportunity for firms they're going to have even more accounting profit as a result. Okay, so if there are profits in the long run, firms will enter the market to get their share of those profits. So we call these barriers to entry. Barriers to entry are factors that can prevent a firm from entering or exiting a given market. So a market with very low barriers, like a perfectly competitive market, has more competition and the individual firms make less profit, generally speaking, because firms can enter and get a split of that profit at any time. When a firm has very high barriers, like a monopoly, there's very little competition, and each individual firm makes a whole lot more profit. In a perfectly competitive, profits are always going to result in more firms entering the market because there are very low barriers to entry. Anyone can start farming potatoes in the long run, right? And when there are losses, firms are going to leave because there's very little incentive for them to stay because there's no sunk costs. It's very easy to shut it down and just stop farming potatoes, for example. And keep that in mind. Okay, that's it. Khan Academy, firm short run decisions to produce and long run decisions to enter and exit the market. Keep in mind, when losses are greater than your fixed costs, you're going to shut it down, as indicated as when price falls below average variable costs on a graph. And also remember, when perfectly competitive firms are profitable, in the long run, other firms are going to enter the market and take their share of that profit. And when a perfectly competitive market, if all the firms are experiencing losses, firms are going to exit that market in the long run. If you have those two things under your belt, you're going to be in good shape. I will see you back in class so we can break this down even further. Peace.